It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
Welcome, everyone, to 41 is the Mic. I am Matt Derrick with Chiefs Digest alongside Nick Jacobs, who, third episode in a row, is still a scheduling enthusiast. I need to come up with a new one for you, Nick, but you're going to remain scheduling enthusiast through today.
It's fine. It's schedule week, okay? You got draft week, you got shark week, you got scheduling week, Matt. So I'm completely fine with that being the case.
We have a great conversation this week talking about the NFL schedule. We had a lot of fun with this. Talked to Charlotte Carey, who's the director of broadcasting for the NFL, and just an incredible amount of insight, Nick, into just how the NFL goes about building their schedule from the very beginning, especially how it relates specifically to the Chiefs, because the Chiefs are, as you will learn, America loves the Kansas City Chiefs, Nick. That's one of the things we learned from this conversation with Charlotte. And building a schedule around the Chiefs is pretty difficult.
Yeah, because everybody wants to have them on their air because they know what it's going to do for them advertising-wise. So I totally get it.
Yeah, and essentially, Netflix came into the ballgame probably essentially to get Kansas City Chiefs because, they probably would have done the Christmas Day anyway, but there's no doubt that the Chiefs being a part of the Christmas Day package for Netflix was a big part of the deal.
Well, and with them having the quarterback documentary and what Mahomes potentially did for that, and Kirk Cousins really kind of, Mahomes kind of helped bring attention to Kirk Cousins as a part of it, with Mahomes being in every single week of it. Him and Kirk kind of really carried that quarterback documentary whenever Mariota was had his injury happen. So, at that point, I think that's part of the reason, you're going to have week 3 Chiefs Falcons.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely, this conversation with Charlotte will definitely give you a perspective so that you understand how this schedule kind of all came to be and how difficult it is to put together, why certain decisions were made. We get into everything. And not only just, international games for the future, but even this year, as far as how Kansas playing at Arrowhead impacted the schedule, the future as far as, over-the-air games in Kansas City and, being able to continue to watch the Chiefs even in the era of streaming. Nick mentioned the NFC South being prominent in the Chiefs schedule this year in prime time. We got into it all with Charlotte. Well, Charlotte, I wanted to start off with talking a little bit just about the overall process and just how you go about building the NFL schedule, and particularly with attention on the Chiefs and what's kind of the input from the very beginning.
You know what? It's a good question, Matt. We talk to each club before we kind of lock ourselves in the room every year, and we have to find out about any potential stadium blocks or baseball conflicts or things of that nature, and we take that all into account as we go into the process, and obviously need to make sure that we're not playing home games when the stadium's not available. So that's kind of our main point of contact, and the teams may also write some preferences in there and things along those nature, and we'll take it all under advisement. But the process is really, after the Super Bowl, we know the matchups after the regular season ends. And then after the Super Bowl, we know at least who the kickoff host is going to be, Kansas City. And at that point, we kind of close and lock the door and start tinkering with different iterations of the overall schedule and primetime mixes and such. And it really is a little bit like Groundhog Day. We do kind of the same thing every day. We set off our solves, come in the morning, take a look at everything that solved overnight, all of the different iterations. And then from there, it's really just writing the new rules, the good, the bad, the ugly, what we like, didn't like, what we never want to see again. And, we actually really like that in week 6, and those sorts of things. We start to either kind of urge the computer in those directions or lock things out completely, and it's running it again. And every night it's the same exact process. Once we get down the stretch, I would say that largely the structure and primes are kind of locked in terms of the games we like and some of the areas we like, but we let some of it float. And from there, it's finding the best possible mixes of the rest of the schedule, whether it's Sunday afternoons, and also making sure the team schedules, there's nothing that is too overly complicated for any one team and not competitively impactful. So we kind of iterate on that towards the end. And after we've honed in on a lot of the things we like, and the winner eventually ends up just being the best possible iteration of best TV schedule, best overall team schedule, and it's hard to kind of, they don't generally work together all the time, so it's one of those things that takes a lot of iterating at the end to just fix that one onerous 3-game road trip that we really don't want to see, but we really like everything else about the schedule. So we think we landed on a good one this year.
Now, I know you're in a unique situation with this one, with having the Wednesday Christmas game. So can you remember, other than maybe COVID, that there's a time where a team's literally going to play every day of the week except Tuesday, like the Chiefs will this year?
Definitely not any time in modern history. This is unprecedented territory for us, and it's kind of fun, right? I do think the Chiefs have a fantastic schedule this year. They're obviously going to be in a lot of national windows, but the whole idea of what we're calling this Christmas round robin, team had to play Saturday of week 16 in order to be able to play a Wednesday. By our rules, we need those 4 days in between, so we couldn't play Sunday to Wednesday. We needed to have those teams create new windows that Saturday to play Saturday to Wednesday. So, this whole little round robin for Christmas is really exciting for us. It's 4 teams that I think as a schedule team we're excited about, with Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Houston, and Kansas City, just, playing each other in different ways. And it was something that we played with different iterations of, you needed 4 teams that were going to play each other, 4 teams that you thought were going to be competitive down the stretch, and, could hold down those windows. And so we looked at a lot of different options, and I think we got comfortable pretty quickly with these 4. As you know, the NFC North and AFC North are both really exciting this year. AFC North obviously is, we played around with some of these different teams that were in this mix, but I think we all ended up liking this different mix for Christmas. It's a new phenomenon playing on a Wednesday, but we've played on Christmas the last few years and our fans have loved it. So hopefully it'll be another exciting Christmas for everyone.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Christmas, because that's kind of one of the things I wanted to definitely talk about was just the process of building that. And you clearly went deep into it, because when hearing about the round robin originally, it's like, okay, well, this would make the sense if it's just 4 divisional teams, or even just 2 teams from one division. Yeah. But you even got the Titans involved, so you got teams from 3 different divisions, the Texans rather. How did you go about building that? And is that something you start with the computer, saying, hey, we know we want the Chiefs on the Christmas day? Are there other teams involved too? Does it just organically kind of develop?
This one we did a little bit by hand, I would say. We used the computer for a lot of the actual build of the overall structure, but this one, just given how unique it was, needing 4 teams that played each other and to be relevant in national windows late in the season, I think we could have found a lot of different options here, but we really liked. We obviously really like the Chiefs on Christmas, and it was something that, again, we got comfortable with pretty quickly with these 4 teams, and did let the computer run with it a bit and iterate on it. You could have added other NFC North teams in there as well, but AFC North teams in there as well. But it was something that once it landed on these 4 in those spots, we ended up really liking it. It's one of the things that we somewhat locked in earlier on in the process.
For you guys, what was it that made the NFC South appealing in prime time? Because the Chiefs will have 2 Monday night games and then also a Sunday night game against the NFC South.
I think there's a couple of different factors there. Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta definitely makes Atlanta a little bit more interesting, for sure. Tampa, Baker Mayfield re-signing. I personally, my team jokes that I'm on the Baker train every year. I think Baker's a lot of fun and an interesting personality and a fun guy to watch on the field. So I do think that you have some interesting teams there, and I think are not sure as a scheduled team who will really be the front runner in that division. So using those teams in prime could be interesting, and then watching down the stretch as who kind of pulls out as the front runner, or if it's a tight race at the end.
I mean, you mentioned Baker and the Buccaneers. That game was one that I thought was a real underdog for being the opening week one game of the season, especially since the NFL the last couple of years had NFC AFC games as that kind of opener. Is there any overall philosophy each year for choosing what game is going to be in the kickoff game? Does it change? Does it evolve? How is the process of choosing that opponent for week one for the Super Bowl champions go about?
Yeah, it's one of the first things that we talk about, to be honest with you. Obviously, it's to start the whole year, and from there, it's a trickle-down effect. So we had talked about actually Houston for a while, but obviously we can't use Houston there. We're going to use Houston on for the round robin for Christmas on week 16. But we ended up this year looking at a lot of different teams and actually letting it float in the computer for a while and seeing what it brought with it in terms of different options over the course of the schedule. So we ended up obviously with Baltimore and got really comfortable with that game. I think from the start, everyone was comfortable with that game. AFC Championship rematch, two very dynamic and exciting quarterbacks, something that we could really kind of get behind and would be an exciting start to the year. But we also definitely looked at, as I said, Houston. We looked at Cincinnati. We looked at division opponents. I think you could have made a case for each of those for different reasons that could have been a good start to the season. And again, it's overall, I think for us, it's looking at the overall mix of what that does. Making one move changes everything over the course of the schedule. It's so intertwined and interconnected. So I do think that, it was really nice this year to have the flexibility with so many decent opponents to let it float and see what came with it. But I think that as a team, we all got comfortable with Baltimore over the course of the process pretty early on.
Now, speaking of being intertwined there, I know a colleague of yours within the past day described you as the wizard of Sunday games because of the challenges you have of keeping up with the right amount of promising games for each partner, but also making sure that Sunday slate kind of stays intriguing for everybody. What's that process like for you? Like looking through every Sunday and saying, hey, I got to make sure that these partners get to the minimum here, but also that we can have an intriguing lineup across the board each week.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at Sunday afternoons, it's one of the more complex areas of this schedule, right? We pull the good games out for prime and want to put our, quote unquote, best products in prime time to make sure that we have, the right games for our viewers so that everyone can see them. But at the same time, we need to leave stuff around for Sunday afternoon, and we can't leave Sunday afternoon with, areas of the country that may be too dense in one particular section. And so it's definitely, again, a balancing act, trying to make sure that you're geographically dispersed and have something that would make sense in the West, something in the North, South, East, and maybe even down in Florida, and trying to make sure that you have the right games for different areas of the country. With the regionalization model, it's not even only what's on Fox, you have to also look at what's on CBS. So it's looking at both sides. There's actual competition. So you want to make sure that in each of those areas of the country, you have a game for each network that can, quote unquote, play in those areas, and that they have something of value that they can actually use to make sure that they're serving the fans the right way in each of those areas. So it is definitely an interesting point. The Sunday afternoon piece is really complex because we're looking at it. It's not just what's a good game, but it's also what's on the competition on the other side. What markets will that play in? So you're almost thinking about a map in your head and where each of these games will go as we sit here, in May, and trying to make sure that we have the right overall mix of Sunday afternoons so that CBS and Fox both have, a good slate of games that can play over the course of the country.
And I'm kind of imagining it just like you've got a map up there, and it's an election style map, and each time you're adjusting it with the color coded of the country, what that'd be. It sounds like.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And you're like, actually, I think that this game maybe can go a little wider there, maybe up into Minnesota. It's exactly what it is. And so you're really looking at, what's relevant for that area of the country, looking at historic ratings and what the area is generally like. But then you have kind of lightning in a bottle, right? Like you guys know what happened with Mahomes a few years ago. And when he came on the scene, all of a sudden, Kansas City was like gold from a rating standpoint. Everyone wanted to watch Kansas City. Mahomes was the most dynamic and interesting, or is the most dynamic and interesting player potentially in the league. And it's just, we're clearly using them all over the national and primetime slate. I think that they may have 4 games overall that aren't in national windows, if I'm doing my math correctly. So it's pretty amazing, right? So as I look at the Sunday afternoons, anytime we see a KC there, I'm like, oh, well, Kansas City can play pretty much everywhere over the course of the country, but it's very rare that we actually get a Kansas City on a Sunday afternoon.
Sure. When it comes to making sure that the partners get all the touches of Kansas City that they want in the appearances, I know there's a couple of things. One, Amazon gets their one appearance with the Chiefs, but it's the Black Friday game, and I'm assuming that's a suitable exception for Amazon to get the Black Friday game rather than the Thursday night game for the Chiefs. And Fox only has the one Chiefs game. So is that something where hey, there could be a flex later on down the line to get the Chiefs on the Fox, or?
It's a good question. So, I think that the new construct of the TV package, you're hitting on it exactly. It used to be very much CBS had the AFC and Fox had the NFC. Now we have a lot more flexibility within that in order to flip games back and forth. But there are also questions of what we call minimums. You'll notice that CBS only has one Dallas game this year, for instance. So for teams like a Kansas City or a Dallas, we run out of appearances pretty quickly that we have the ability to, flip over to the other side, I would say. And so, especially with that Christmas round robin in there, it becomes a little bit trickier to take games away. We have minimums that we still have to hit for CBS and Fox for their traditional AFC and NFC teams. So while you're only seeing one Fox game this year, that doesn't mean that there will always be one Fox game. We will obviously try to get Fox as much Kansas City as we can as well, and spread the love. Obviously, every network wants more Kansas City, but for this year, they did get the potentially best Kansas City game, we can say, even though they only got one Super Bowl rematch in Week 7. Should be pretty exciting with Brady on the call.
Yeah, and kind of speaking of that round robin part, the Chiefs will have that stretch from December 15th with the Browns to the Texans, then to Christmas Day, where they'll have 3 games in 10 days. But when I started looking at the schedule for other teams, not only in the round robin, but throughout the season, you guys, I thought, did a really good job of being able to make sure that each team across the league had to kind of share in that, not necessarily having a competitive disadvantage, but having an equal playing field at different points in the season. So I know the Jets have 3 games in 11 days. So what kind of are the challenges of making sure that when you, like you said, when you pull the string here for this team and kind of keeping it all even keel as you can?
Yeah. I think that, we're in a little bit of new territory, I would say, within the last few years with all these different partners and windows and multiple teams on Thursday night. And it's a little bit more of the new normal, I would say. So, it's something that everyone's getting used to. But there are a lot of teams that end up with, a Monday, Sunday, Thursday, as you were saying, even the Jets and such. So I think that there are 6 teams, if I'm remembering correctly, overall that end up with something along those lines. So again, it's something we definitely look at, and these are all factors that we work really closely with our football analytics teams on to make sure that anything that we do from a schedule standpoint, we want to make sure that there is no competitive impact that we are putting on a team. So we take all of these factors very seriously, but there are also windows in which we need to play. So we need to balance all of those factors. But I can tell you that we look very closely and work with our football analytics team to make sure that we are always innovating but doing the right things for the teams.
There's another quirk that the Chiefs have in their schedule that from September 15th through November 4th, they've got one home game. And some of that's related to the bye week. I know it looks like a part of that's probably related to the Chiefs not wanting to play on back-to-back days where Arrowhead Stadium is hosting Kansas football and their college slate. How did that kind of evolve? And I know there's a one-day game in November 9th and 10th when Kansas will play against Iowa State on Saturday, and then the Chiefs are playing the Broncos the next day. So there is at least one back-to-back day at Arrowhead. How did that kind of part of the schedule evolve, especially dealing with, like you talked about earlier, when the stadium is blocked and when the Chiefs have a situation like that where they're co-hosting another team?
Yeah, I think that if you look at over the course of the schedule overall, you'll see some stretches that you may question, but there are a lot of stadium blocks in there, whether it's baseball related or college football related or concert related. There are stadium blocks that impact our schedule across the board. And so, there are always stretches that are going to have to, we obviously can't play at home when the stadium is not available. So you'll see stretches for a lot of teams, and sometimes it just falls that way, to be honest with you. So it's not necessarily always caused by a block, but I would say that there are definitely blocks that are impacting, the schedule overall, and it's a factor of, again, is it competitively impactful? Is it something that we should not be playing, or is it something that may be a little kooky, but it's okay, and everyone will figure it out? And then you look down the stretch and you're like, okay, well, then we're home actually a decent amount there. You're going to spread your home games over the course of the season somewhere, and the NFC has the extra home game this year, and the AFC has one less. So you may see just a little bit more of the disparity on the AFC side.
Now there's always something I'm sure you learn from doing the scheduling process each year. What were kind of some of your takeaways this year, having a couple additional factors to add into the mix?
I think that the Christmas wrinkle was actually interesting, and especially as you look, like we talked a little bit about Sunday afternoons, but you look late in the season, then a week like week 17, right? We have our 2 Christmas games on Wednesday, our Thursday night game on Amazon. Then we have the 3 Saturday games on NFL Network that Saturday. We have then our regular Sunday afternoon with 1 o'clock, 4:25, and NBC on Sunday night, and then we have a Monday night game. That only leaves 4 games for both CBS and Fox on Sunday afternoon, so each. So we had to really work on week 17 as a whole to make sure that we had good inventory in all of those windows, and make sure that everything we thought was going to be at least potentially relevant at that point. So that was a week that we worked really hard on this year overall. Just a lot of additional national windows. It should be a really exciting week overall for the NFL, and I hope we got it right in terms of the actual games within those windows. But the good news is, for at least the Saturday games, we have a pool of 5 games to choose from for those Saturday games for NFL Network, and then we'll take 2 of them back to Sunday afternoon. So we do have a little bit of flexibility, and of course flex scheduling, but it is that week in particular was one that we spent a lot of time on and focused a lot of energy on this year.
I know it's difficult to balance the primetime games, and especially just to make sure that, especially when you got a team like the Chiefs that I know the partners want to be on as much as possible. Kansas City is also unique too, and the fact that it draws fans from a much wider area than probably a lot of other fan bases do. And I know that's the complaint that I usually get whenever there's a flex game, especially if a Chiefs game moves from a primetime into a spot, day afternoon or back and forth, that fans who are driving 8 hours and having their trips interrupted. How do you kind of calculate that and consider it in with the fans to try and minimize disruptions, knowing that hey, a noon game at Arrowhead may just not be something that can happen 4 or 5 times a year. Maybe it's only going to happen once a year.
Exactly. It's definitely something that we take into account. And I would say that our standards for flex are pretty high. We definitely, I would say, one of our main points every time we talk about potentially flexing a game is the impact on the fans, particularly around the holidays and whatnot. But it's something that we take very seriously. It's one thing that I would have to say here, though, is, just we have to make sure that we're doing right by everybody and making sure that we have our best product and our best windows. And it's definitely something, as I said, that we take very seriously from a fan perspective of those home fans and people that are actually traveling in to see those games. I've even been in that position where I've gone as a fan and had something flex, and it changes everything. But it's a balancing act, I would say, by the league, of trying to make sure that we're putting the best games in the right windows, while also balancing the inconveniences for sure that it would place on some of our fans.
This one, it's more of an opinion thing, I would say. With NFL games, whether they're on cable or streaming, they're still kind of offered in local markets over the air for both fan bases. And over time, we'll see what happens with streaming and everything. But do you think it'll still continue to where there's always going to be in the local market available over the air for say a Black Friday game, Chiefs Raiders, or the Christmas Day Netflix game type of thing.
I would say that's something that's very important to us. If I told you that's going to happen forever, I don't have a crystal ball, and
Right.
and we'll see what the future holds. But I can tell you, as we sit here today, that's very important to us. And so you will have those OTA games in the home markets, and I would expect that would be the way that we treat it moving forward. I don't expect there to be a shift from that.
I know Mark Donovan with the Chiefs had told us that he plans on raising the team's hand every chance they get to go play overseas. And obviously, Germany has been a big market for them, had a big success last year with the game in Frankfurt. I know they really want to play in Munich, and there was maybe an opportunity this year. I don't know how you would have squeezed it into the Chiefs schedule for a Germany trip this year. But what prospects do you see as far as that going forward, especially because, I know there's an emphasis now on making sure that every team plays overseas and everybody gets their games in, and even teams that maybe have avoided it in the past. But with a team like the Chiefs, that seem to be pretty eager about playing overseas. How do you kind of accommodate that?
Yeah, I would say that we definitely have to kind of spread it out and make sure that we're sending multiple teams over there. Jacksonville has their interesting deal where they go over and actually stay, and they are a designated team every year and will and play in Wembley for one of their games, but then go over as a road opponent. But I do think that our entire international slate, I don't think you're going to see it going the other direction. I don't think you're going to see less games. I think that there's a potentially to see more games in the future internationally. So I believe that clubs will definitely have opportunities to play internationally. And it's something that we work closely with our international and events group on which teams are going over to play. And the opponents for the designated teams, those opponents every year, we let it float from a schedule perspective. Actually, the way it works is there are designated teams every year that will give up their home game and go play overseas. That come from the league office. And then beyond that, the schedule team works with the clubs and also our constituents internally. And the clubs can protect, the designated teams can protect one opponent from going overseas that they want to play in their home stadium. And they also, we generally don't play division games. So everybody else is kind of on the table. There are certain matchups that we may have earmarked for somewhere else in the schedule already at that point. But generally speaking, we have a lot of flexibility in who's going over for those international games as opponents. So in the future, I do think that there is plenty of opportunity for the Chiefs to go back. And also, we'll see what happens with international series, but potentially more international games in the future.
And this will be my final question for you. What do you want Chiefs fans to know about the schedule?
That America loves the Chiefs. That's what we want the Chiefs fans to know about the schedule. You're looking at it, right? I mean, it is a lot of national television for the Chiefs. We're really excited about this slate. They're a heavy driver of our national TV schedule, and again, I do think that it's exciting to start the season with the AFC Championship rematch and two, I think of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the game. So fun way to start. Christmas will be exciting. Black Friday. I mean, they're the holiday of Chiefs. They're everywhere. So we're really excited about the schedule overall and to see what the Chiefs can do this year.
And my last question, Charlotte, I thought Nick and I were about some of the two only schedule and broadcasting nerds that are in the Chiefs kingdom over here. But I learned this week there's a lot of Charlotte Carey and Mike North fans that were very excited that we were going to have you on the show.
You know what?
How much do you just love what you do? I mean, because you certainly seem like you enjoy it.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. If you asked me maybe a week and a half ago, I may have said I love it a lot, but I'm really excited for next week. But no, I'm kidding. It's amazing. I love this part of my job, and we have such an incredible team that almost has become like family. We push each other. We try to push the envelope every year, try new things, get better as a group, try to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our fans always. And I think that that's kind of what drives this, right? Is it impacts so many people's lives. And we realize that and realize kind of that it's something that it's not taken lightly, that we're trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing for everybody, whether it's the TV partners, the teams, all of the fans. It's a big balancing act at the end of the day. So I think that as we kind of continue on in this process, we need to continue to push the envelope and make sure that we're doing the right things for all of the different parties. But I would say that my favorite part is just working as part of this team. We have Hans Schroeder leading it, Mike North, obviously, who's kind of the schedule guru, who becomes just a media star this week, Ani Bose, and a bunch of others that are in the room now. And it wasn't too long ago where it was really 4 of us in the room, and it's become kind of 7 or 8 now. And it's a much bigger team. Everyone has their area of expertise, and it's a fun group to work with. And again, I think that growing it has really made us look at things in different ways and push the envelope a bit more.
Well, Charlotte, we greatly appreciate your time. This has been an absolute blast. I think that everyone who's going to listen to this is going to have a better understanding of just how all of it comes together. And can't help you. I thank you enough for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me.
So that is our conversation with Charlotte Carey, Director of Broadcasting for the NFL. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, Nick. I mean, some great stuff from Charlotte.
Yeah, no, I mean, we could have talked to her for 3 or 4 hours, but she's got other things to do, and I'm sure she had a lot of other interviews to do that day. So I appreciate her time. I appreciate Andrew of NFLPR being able to set that up. I don't know if he wants his last name out there or not, so I'm just going to call him Andrew. I do know his last name, but thank you to NFLPR for being able to set that up. And, you know, I'm thankful that we were able to get him on here and be able to listen to what Charlotte had to say for somebody who's inside the room. Because I get bothered when I hear people kind of complain about a schedule, and I'm like, well, here's an idea. How about you go try to get an interview with the people or learn about what the process is, so you kind of have a better grasp of it. But that's what Matt and I do on 41 is the mic. Okay.
What was your big takeaway? Was there anything that really stood out to you in the conversation?
I would say for the most part, like, it just, I don't know. I know it sounds weird, but I just enjoy hearing the process. I enjoy learning about what they have to think about, what factors change certain things. And, and then, so it just, I don't know. I don't think there's one thing specifically in particular that kind of stood out above the rest, but I felt like you and I wanted to make sure we got what questions Chiefs fans had wanted answered, that we got those out there and kind of really got to find out what their thought process was on those, whether it was the 3 games in 10 days aspect of it, or, why the NFC South was so prominently featured, and then kind of streaming itself and all that type of stuff. So I enjoyed it all, Matt. What about you?
Yeah, to me, it was a big part of it was, and I think we've seen this evolve. She mentioned trying to make sure that nobody plays 3 games on the road. I mean, they do as best a job as they can to try to make sure that no team has these really difficult stretches. And, and the Chiefs have 3 games in 10 days. Almost every team that plays on Thursday night probably has a 3 games in 11-day stretch. I mean, that's just, one of the things that every team has to kind of share the burden. And that's probably the one thing. I mean, if you don't like your team's schedule, go look at another team's and really look at it and analyze it, because you're probably going to find something with that schedule you don't like either. That's just kind of the reality of it. I mean, you can't make a perfect schedule for everybody. And, I said it before we had our conversation, and I think I'm reaffirmed it now, is that they know that they've done the best job if everybody's just kind of moderately happy with their schedule. You can't make everybody ecstatic, and you don't want to make anybody angry. You just want to make everybody, complacent with their schedule, and obviously a lot goes into it, and especially a lot goes into it when you have a franchise like the Chiefs that's right now one of the 2 premier viewing products that the NFL has. I mean, it's the Chiefs and the Cowboys. No. And the care and the trouble that has to go into scheduling the Chiefs is absolutely amazing.
I agree, Matt. Well, I think it's about time we get out of here.
All right. Well, we will be back on Tuesday night with the usual Q&A. And then next week, another episode of 41 is the mic. We've got OTAs going on. So you're going to be hearing from what happens out of the One Arrowhead Drive this week and out on the practice field. So, Nick, I'll leave it to you.
We'll see you back here next Sunday other than the Q&A that'll be coming up this Tuesday. Until next time, I bid you adieu.
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHP 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.